I want to welcome everybody to our CASN Youth Lawn Mowing Safety webinar. I'm Andrea Swenson. I'm the director of the National Children's Center for Rural and Agricultural Health and Safety located in Marshfield, Wisconsin. We direct the Childhood Agricultural Safety Network, or CASN, which is hosting this webinar today. I'm happy to introduce Whitney Pennington, a member of the CASN leadership team, to introduce a little bit about our lawn mowing campaign and activities coming up with CASN. So Whitney, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Whitney Pennington. My pronouns are she, her. I am the outreach lead for the High Plains Intermountain Center for Ag Health and Safety at Colorado State University in Colorado, USA. And I'm also a member of the CASN leadership team. So I get the honor, as Andrea said, of giving you a little context for why we're here. So CASN historically has led campaigns on childhood and youth ag safety topics. We've done tractor safety, ATV safety, and as we concluded some work on ATV safety, we were looking for a new topic, and we heard from needs assessment and from being in these meetings and talking with CASN members that lawn mowing safety was something folks were interested in and starting to work on. And so we did a resource scan and decided to adopt that as our next topic area to try to figure out where we could fit in and plug in and where there was a resource gap. From the folks who are experts who are going to be talking to us today, those are the two areas that we identified that sort of exist in this space. We have young children bystander injuries, and then we also have youth and their readiness to mow as individuals who are using lawnmowers. So when we dug into those two spaces, there was more work and more resources already that existed for the bystander space. Not that it's not important, but there were already some resources available there, whereas we felt like the how do we help youth get ready to mow themselves, that space didn't have quite as many resources. So that's why we chose for our efforts of creating new resources that we specifically focused on that area. So on the screen, you will see the repository or the site, the campaign landing page, where we have all of our youth mow readiness campaign materials. There are resources from folks within the network on assessing a youth's readiness, some basic safety tools of, what are those safety things that a youth needs to know in order to operate safely, and a host of other information related to lawn mowing safety from both our CASN members and from outside of our official membership network. We have the actual sort of physical campaign material, our posters, and there are several versions of this poster. So broadly, we have three different audiences for the posters. There's, as you can see, the green one on the screen, that is for adults. I'm interested to capture their attention on what they need to know about supervising youth. The orange one is for youth, and that has a little fun, younger energy for what youth need to know before they operate. And then there's also one, it's not pictured here, but it has images of electric lawnmowers, and the messages are slightly tweaked for the electric space, knowing that in countries outside of the USA in particular, electric lawnmowers are a little bit more popular and are used more often. So in addition to those three versions of each material, we also have this entire page and all of those resources exclusively in Spanish, and they are a little different. So the Spanish campaign landing site refers to Spanish language resources. So the folks we've linked to on each of these pages is not quite identical because we felt it was really important for the resources to be in the language of the campaign materials. So all of those are available for you, these posters, to download in multiple different versions and different sizes and print and digital and all of that. So we'd invite you to check that out and to incorporate into your promotion activities as we look towards, at least in the US and Western Hemisphere, and Northern Hemisphere, when we look towards spring and lawn mowing season. So excited to learn more from our speakers today. Andrea, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Whitney. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers for today. I just want to express our thanks and gratitude for them taking the time to talk with us about lawnmower safety and sharing some of their expertise. So our first presenter today is Dr. Charles Jennissen. Dr. Jennissen is a pediatric emergency medicine specialist and clinical professor of emergency medicine at the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine. Dr. Jennissen has helped establish, sustain, study, and grow a wide range of successful injury prevention programs, including lawnmower safety and other activities associated with rural living. Dr. Jennissen has dedicated much of his medical career to increasing public awareness of injury prevention. Our second speaker for today is Dr. Diane Rohlman. Dr. Rohlman is an Associate Dean of Faculty in the College of Public Health and a professor in the Department of Occupational and Environmental Health at the University of Iowa. Dr. Rohlman directs the Healthier Workforce Center of the Midwest, as well as the Agricultural Safety and Health Training Program. Her research focuses on the health effects of occupational and environmental exposures, with an emphasis on the increased workplace risks faced by younger employees. So thank you again. Casey will be monitoring the chat. At the end, we'll come back for questions and answers. If you have any during the presentations, please feel free to share your questions in the chat, and we can address them as they come in as needed, and have some further discussion afterwards. So please, Dr. Jennissen, thank you.
Well, thanks, Andrea. I'm going to get kind of situated here a little bit. So is that sharing?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, get off your grass. Let's do more to prevent pediatric lawnmower injuries. So I'm going to start out with a case today. There we go. So this is a 3-year-old boy. His father was mowing the lawn, and the mother had just gotten back from getting some groceries and returning with the children. And the patient ran up from behind the father who was mowing to get a ride. And the father was just backing up the mower and ran over the lower half of his body. The father had to lift the lawnmower up and to pull the child out from under the lawnmower. He thought the child was going to die in front of him, to tell you the truth. He called 911. He was seen at the outside hospital where the patient was noted to have eviscerated bowel and injuries to both legs. He received blood transfusions and then was transferred to the University of Iowa Stead Family Children's Hospital. So I have graphic pictures of what his legs and so forth look like, but I'm not going to show you those. I'm just going to show you a couple x-rays here. You can see one of his lower extremities where he has an open compound fracture of his lower leg. And then this is a x-ray of his hip. But if you see here in this area just to the right of his pelvis, there's a kind of soft tissue mass there. That's the eviscerated bowel. So this is Tate. Tate has had more than 30 surgeries now. He was able to keep his leg and is actually like participating in soccer now and everything. But he's not the only one who's had this happen. I mean, if you look over on the internet, there's just all kinds of kids who have had this happen, and a lot of them have had amputations. They're really kind of just all over the place. Tragic kind of things for families. So annually, there's about 10,000 children who are injured by lawnmowers. About 5% of those result in amputations. About 23 children visit an ED in the United States for a lawnmower-related injury each day. And lawnmower-related incidents is the third leading cause of pediatric amputations, but more importantly, it's the most common cause of major limb loss in children less than 10 years of age. So one study found that over half the children treated by pediatric orthopedics for lawnmower injuries ended up with an amputation. So as you can imagine, the impact of these injuries on the child and their family is devastating, both psychologically and financially. And despite this, lawnmower injury incidence rates have remained essentially unchanged for the past 40 years. And although about a quarter of all injuries occur to children less than 5 years of age, they are often more serious than those seen in other older children. For example, children 0 to 6 years had the highest average injury severity score and 7 times greater odds of intensive care unit admissions compared to older children. In addition, children less than 5 years were 6 times more likely to have an amputation than children 6 years and older. So some serious injuries occur when lawnmower operators allow young children to ride with them while mowing. It may only take a moment for a child to slip away or jump off and then be run over by the mower. And most lawnmower safety guidelines, emphasize this. You shouldn't be having children with you when you're mowing. Some studies have shown younger children injured by riding lawnmowers have even higher proportions that are injured, though, as bystanders. Most commonly while the operator is backing up and operating the mower in reverse. So usually during these incidents, a young child is approaching a riding lawnmower in operation, and the operator turns or reverses the mower, knocking over the child and running them over. Now, the presence of the child in the area is often unbeknownst to the operator, whose attention is really on the task at hand, mowing. And the operator is often unable to hear due to the noise of the mower and or the use of hearing protection, which they should be doing. So in our study, we wanted to investigate the circumstances surrounding pediatric riding lawnmower injuries to identify potential contributing risk factors and behaviors that lead to these events. And to do this, we surveyed followers and members of both the public and private lawnmower injury support and prevention Facebook page who had or were aware of children who had suffered a serious riding lawnmower related injury. And the questions addressed the circumstances, injuries, and the behaviors before and at the time of the incident, including the history of rides on lawnmowers. So we identified 140 children in this study. They ranged in age from 12 months to 16 years. Almost 3/5 of them were 2 to 4 years of age at the time of their injury. About 3/5 of the children lived outside of a town or city. So a lot of these did happen in kind of rural areas. So about a quarter of them, they indeed were injured as a passenger. So they either jumped or fell off and then were run over. But you can see almost 70% of them were actually bystanders. Almost 4/5 of the incidents occurred on the lawn of the family's home. 15% occurred on a relative's property. The lawnmower operator, and over 3/4 of the case were male. About half of them were fathers and stepfathers. Overall, 29% occurred while the mower was traveling forward. Now, 60% of the injuries, though, occurred while the mower was traveling in reverse. And this was even higher for bystanders. You can see over 3/4 of them, the mower was traveling in reverse when the bystander was injured, while for passengers, that was only 17% of them. And most of the passengers were injured while mowing while the mower was moving forward, about 3/5 of them. So almost all the children were hospitalized. The lengths of stay ranged from one to 100 days with an average of 26 days. Nearly 2/3 required intensive care unit admission. The ICU admission range was 1 to 35 days with an average of about 9 days. Almost all of them required surgery. The number of surgeries ranged from 1 to 37 with an average of 7. So it's very common for these kids who need multiple surgeries. Nearly all of them had an amputation or a permanent disability. Only 3% of bystanders had injuries to the upper extremity as compared to 21% of passengers, which makes some sense. If you're a passenger and you fall off, or you might put your outstretched hand out, and that might be the extremity that gets run over by the lawnmower. A higher proportion of bystanders, over 2/3 of them, had injuries to the lower extremity, which also makes some sense. If they're running up to the lawnmower in reverse, and it's going to run over their lower extremities, that it knocks the child over. So one might ask, why would a toddler run up to a loud riding lawnmower they would normally consider scary and something to avoid? Well, we hypothesize that children who have had a riding lawnmower injury as a bystander are likely to have been given rides on a mower prior to their injury, thus transforming these once scary machines into riding playthings and desensitizing children to their inherent dangers. So, thus, children given rides will be more likely to approach a lawnmower in use and significantly increase their chance of a traumatic injury. And in our study, we found that almost 3/4 of them, the person answering the survey said that the child had received at least one ride on a lawnmower prior to their injury incident. The number of rides, these are for the bystanders, the number of rides ranged from 1 to 100, with many respondents simply stating multiple or a lot. And this probably is the lower limit of this. It might be higher because maybe some of the people answering the survey didn't know that the child had actually received a ride and they had. So our study conclusions that not giving children rides on lawnmowers, both when mowing and when not mowing, and safety engineering changes may be critical in preventing these serious injuries. So I think there are some engineering things that could be done possibly that for motion detections or something at the rear of the vehicles so if something's approaching them that the lawnmower would stop, or some other kind of things that could be done to help prevent that in an engineering way. But the big thing is not to give kids rides on the mower. But this might be something that's going to be very difficult to change. So this was from a Facebook page that I ran across. The mother posted this picture that stated, "Father and son on the lawnmower. It's a dad rite of passage." It shouldn't be a rite of passage, and certainly is not a very good tradition to uphold. Similar to kind of like giving rides on tractors. One thing, as I was looking for pictures talking about this issue, I found one of the first 4 pictures I found were these 4 pictures. And it kind of illustrates why this might be a very difficult thing to change. These are all pictures. All these 4 males here are dead. And these are the pictures that the families decided to put on their obituary pages because these were giving rides on the lawnmower is such an endearing thing and relationship building things with their children and or grandchildren that they put these pictures on their obituary pages. So this is something that's going to be difficult to change, but certainly something that really needs to. So we did a little bit of qualitative analysis of this data as well. These are some of the open-ended questions that we had. Were there any circumstances that may have affected the supervision of the child that was injured before the incident occurred? Do you have any observations or knowledge about the lawnmower involved that may have contributed to the accident or to the severity of injuries? And please briefly describe the accident and what happened. So one of the things that we found as common theme was that the supervisor being distracted. So doing other tasks, like mom was cleaning out the camper, went to look for him just as the accident happened. Mother was in the kitchen making dinner. Attending other children, so distracted by a grandchild or attending to a baby under 6 months. Visiting, talking with other adults, distracted by mother-in-law. She was talking with another adult. So really important that when lawn mowing is going on, that this is a time you really need to have even increased supervision and eye on the children at all times to make certain that they're not going into the vicinity of the lawnmower. Another thing that was noted is that the supervisor that was for the children was actually mowing the lawn. He told them to sit on the bench and play with his cars and rocks while he mowed the grass. Father was mowing and supervising children at the same time. In fact, found that almost 30% of the cases, the supervisors were the ones operating the lawnmower. And that's really not obviously a kind of recipe for disaster for not adequate supervision of children. And in some of the cases, the child was simply not supervised. The supervisor couldn't see the child. There's some miscommunication. He was supposed to be doing the supervision, or there was no designated supervisor. Another issue, of course, was that the child was sometimes being allowed to be in the vicinity of the lawnmower, either playing and doing other activities around the mower. Like the child, he saw a stick in the grass where his dad was going to mow, so he ran to pick it up. My 2 children were playing outside in a large lawn area while their father mowed. And another issue, as we talked about already, giving rides on the lawnmower. So the child was given a ride the day of the injury. Child ran up to the mower wanting a ride. In some of the cases, the child approached the lawnmower for unknown reasons. Probably in a lot of the cases because they wanted to get a ride. So the conclusions of our qualitative analysis, we did identify a number of risk factors for child bystander lawnmower injuries and kind of reinforced many lawnmower safety directives. So a designated supervisor of children is needed who is not distracted by other activities. The designated supervisor should not be the mower operator. Young children should never be permitted to play or be outside near the mower. And education on the dangers of lawnmowers would be beneficial in preventing children from approaching mowers and from playfully engaging with mowers. And do not give children rides on lawnmowers. Giving rides likely desensitizes children to the inherent dangers and leads them to seek rides when lawnmowers are in operation. So I just want to talk briefly about another study we recently published in Journal of Ophthalmology related to lawnmower-related eye injuries. So we looked at eye injuries from 2004 to 2023. in the Consumer Product Safety Commission's National Electronic Injury Surveillance System. And there was a estimated 120,000 lawnmower-related eye injuries that occurred during that time period, about 6,000 cases per year. Here's the age distribution of injuries. You can see the biggest one is for 31 to 65 years of age. So the children were a fairly low percentage. We'll talk more about that though. Over 3/4 were projectile injuries, most of the time with the operator. And the problem was that few of the cases there was documentation of any eye protection. And so this is a real critical thing when you're mowing, is to always have safety glasses or at least eyeglasses on to protect your eyes from debris. And this can happen a lot just as an operator. But even more concerning is bystanders. So for children, they were a much higher proportion of bystander injuries. So they made up actually 50% of the bystander injuries and only 5% of the operator injuries. And bystanders, as compared to operators, had higher rates of severe injuries requiring hospital admission. This is a child who that screw was thrown up by the lawnmower and hit the child in their eye. And so this is, of course, another potential risk of children being allowed to be in the vicinity or playing around the lawnmowers, that they could be hit by a projectile. And so mower blades can spin at speeds of up to 3,000 revolutions per minute. They're capable of launching a 1.5-pound object at 230 miles per hour. And the kinetic injury is really similar to bullets from firearms. So this can be very serious and cause significant injuries. I'm just going to show you just this case here. It's a 4-year-old boy that I saw. He was in a car seat in the back seat of the car. The mother is driving by a person using a commercial lawnmower. And all of a sudden she heard a pop. She wondered, what was that? She looked in the back and she saw her child slumped over and bleeding from the back of his head. He came in, he had a compound fracture, kind of a depressed skull fracture with bleeding and bruising of his brain. And later was found a little small piece of pipe that had been thrown out by the lawnmower. And so these can be quite serious, and certainly, again, emphasizes the importance of really no bystanders around where people are mowing. One thing I wanted to just point out is that first child I talked about, Tate, and his family after this incident decided to form a nonprofit organization called Tate's Army. And so they're trying to inform people about lawnmower safety, and particularly the problems about giving rides to kids. This is what happened to them and why their child ran up to try to get a ride. They want to make certain that people know of this risk and to not do that. So that's their website right there. So again, we want to, I'm going to stop here and saying, don't give kids rides on lawnmowers. And that's something that it's both when the mowers are engaged and when they're not. So thanks so much. And I will stop sharing right there.
So thanks, Chuck. You really set me up well here. I think we're going to complement each other. So when Chuck talked, he spoke mostly about younger children, and that certainly is a high-risk population, but I want to move up a little bit on the age range. Similar to Chuck, you got to start with what's the problem. And, he mentioned the foot and leg injuries from slipping or falling under a motor, but also let's think about youth as operating the lawnmowers. And so, you may reach into the mower if something gets clogged, trying to, unplug it. Eye injuries were mentioned, but the motors can also get really, really hot, and coming into contact with that can lead to a burn. Reversing a mower, even if here we have a push mower, pulling that back if you trip or fall, or if your foot gets stuck, you can get there. And then for the riding ones, rollovers, or being run over, which Chuck talked about. So they're dangerous. They're designed to cut things. They have sharp moving parts. So, we know a lot of adults get injured, but, let's try to protect our vulnerable populations. So why are youth at risk? And again, I'm moving up the age range here. And one of the reasons is these gas-powered or electric lawnmowers don't require a lot of strength to use them. So that's often the task that's assigned to the child or the adolescent. And it's a rite of passage in many cases where people feel, hey, you're old enough, you're gonna do this and mow the lawn. And I actually mowed the lawn when I was a youth, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. Fortunately, I didn't injure myself. I broke the lawnmower. So either way, we don't want those consequences. But the other thing, a reason why children are at risk is because of their developmental stage. And, we know our bodies and brains develop up until our mid-20s. So we don't have as much strength or coordination or even balance that, we will as adults. And lawnmowers are designed for adult-sized bodies, so that puts youth at risk. But we also know our brains are still developing. Think about it. Think about a teenager who has a short attention span, is easily distracted, maybe lack of impulse control, and decision making. If something does go wrong, or if there's a situation like unplugging the mower, they may not, remember what to do, or they may look at what they've seen done before. And during, adolescence, as our bodies and brains are developing and growing through those growth spurts, we're going to see more fatigue, some experimentation potentially with substance use, and also those distracted behaviors. So this puts youth at risk there. And also, just like me, I wasn't prepared to learn mow the lawn. This was actually my neighbor's lawnmower too. Um, my brother was the one who kind of mowed it at our house, and then the neighbor needed somebody, and my brother wasn't available, so they asked me to do it. I'm like, sure. Well, that didn't end too well. I think I was invited back after the lawnmower was repaired. But that lack of experience, and the other thing is I didn't want to say, well, I don't know how to do this. I think I was given instructions on how to start it, but I really was like, wow, I'm going to get paid to do this. This is a great thing. So that reluctance to speak up is another factor that puts us at risk. So now that we've laid out, why we need to watch this population, let's talk about some strategies that we can use to prevent injuries and to keep people safe. And these can be done by parents, but they can also be done by employers or even educators, thinking about classrooms where you're talking about different activities, or for youth who may have their summer job working as a landscape operator there. And the reason I want to focus on these adults or these supervisors as a generic term is because they're the ones that are in charge of safety. They assign tasks, they know what the hazards are, and they're supposed to train and supervise the youth. And so we want to make sure they have the skills to do this that's going to have an impact there. Another great thing to think about is policies. How old do you have to be, or how tall do you have to be to do this job? What sort of training is required before you can drive the riding lawnmower? And what supervision is going to be provided, especially if it's a workplace where the equipment tends to be bigger and you work more independently. And these supervisors also are role models, and we're being watched. So keep that in mind. So the first thing you need to think about is, what are the risks? And your child, or you should know the youth that you've hired to work with you, to know what they can and can't do. And talking with them and asking questions is one way you can know about their abilities. But you also need to know what to do to protect them and what's related to doing the task. So one of the things that I often do is sit down and do a hazard mapping, and this is where you draw out the workplace or your home or the farm, whatever it is, and you put in the different hazards there, and you have a conversation about how do you prevent those. So that's an easy thing to do. Maybe you don't want to draw it out, but you just have a conversation about it. And this should be done, especially when somebody's doing it for the first time. Watch out for tree roots. Don't run over branches. No riders, those sorts of things. Next thing you want to think about is assigning tasks. And this again is that assessment of, what are you asking the youth or the worker to do to perform the task? And it doesn't matter if they're 8, if they're 10, if they're 14, 18, 22, is you want to, assess, are they strong enough to lift the equipment? Can they reach the pedals on the riding lawnmower? Those are the sorts of things that you need to take into account. And then you want to think about, are they able to understand, what to do if something goes wrong and how to address that. And so, checking that out and supervising them is a great way to think about if they're ready to do this task on their own there. And I'll go back to the cultivatesafety.org resources that are available. These are great resources designed to provide guidelines for parents and employers on tasks that children can do on the farm. And they have a nice materials on operating a lawnmower. And they focus on what do you need to do this safely? What are the responsibilities for the adults? How much supervision? And what are the hazards in any PPE you need to wear, like the hearing protection or closed-toed shoes or shoes that aren't going to slide in wet grass there. So that's a great resource. So training, another important thing. Training needs to occur at multiple time points, certainly when they're hired or they're first performing a task, but also every time you give them a new task or tool. So maybe you're switching a lawnmower, you're going from the push mower to the riding lawnmower. You need to train them again, or even a different riding lawnmower that may have different controls on it there. If there is an incident in the workplace or a new hazard, maybe the weather's kind of cloudy and it may thunderstorm. You want to talk about what do you do in those situations, and you want to check in. Don't just do it one and done. Make sure you go back and see if they understand what's going on. And also when you switch tasks there. So training should talk about how do you do the task, but it also needs to include what are the hazards and what personal protective equipment you need to do this task. What do you do if something goes wrong? Because things do go wrong. Weather events, equipment malfunction, people in your space, those are sorts of things. And what to do if there's an emergency there. And that includes reporting an injury or even a close call, those near misses. That's a great opportunity to check in and they say, man, I, ran over this and something shot out. And it's like, okay, let's talk about that. Were you wearing your eye protection? Did you walk and not see any branches there? So discuss what to do there. And again, if you want to have policies, and especially if this is like a landscaping operation or a farm, that would be a great way to put those into place. So for training, we often recommend something called the teach back method. And this is a series of steps where you review the task, ask them to tell you, ask them to show you, and then check in with them. And I'm going to go ahead. We have a one-page handout on this that you're welcome to use, but we've also created a short video, and I think I'm going to go ahead and play that.
All right, today I'm going to have you power wash some of the equipment. I know it's something I haven't asked you to do for me before.
Oh, I've used a power washer before.
Well, I know it sounds like an easy task, but I want to show you and tell you how to do it safely so that you can repeat the steps and show me how to do it.
Okay.
Okay, first off, we're going to have the equipment. We've got the power washer. You've got the rain suit and the gloves. Here's your shearing protection and your goggles. Then we're going to move the equipment so that the exhaust blows outside. That's pretty important because the exhaust can kill you.
Oh, okay.
All right, so now once we have the hearing protection on properly and the goggles, you can turn the machine on. Okay. Once you get the equipment all started, you're going to wash from top to bottom, from side to side. And you're going to make sure that you do not spray yourself with the wand. There's 2,800 PSI, and it's enough to peel the skin off your body.
Wow.
All right, now explain the steps back to me.
Right. So I put my protective gear on, and I leave the washer out here so that the fumes can stay outside. And then I start washing, top to bottom and side to side. And I make sure that I don't spray myself because I really like my skin.
That's right. Okay, any questions?
Nope.
All right, well, I'm going to check in with you periodically throughout the day and make sure you're doing it right. I'm going to wait to see how you set things up and let you get started. Okay?
So this obviously wasn't a lawnmower, but it gives you an idea of that, explaining how to do it, asking them to repeat it back, and then making sure that they understand. And it covered what are the hazards, and also, what safety precautions do you need to have in place? It takes a few minutes, but it's actually is a good method. And I didn't come up with it. Other people did, but I think a lot of people find this very useful.
All right, today I'm going to have you power wash.
So one of the other things is communication. I mentioned that youth are often reluctant to speak up. especially if they don't know something, they don't know what they don't know. I've never done this, but here, go mow your neighbor's lawns. And I thought I'll just figure it out. Here I am, kind of my first gig, getting paid for it. I didn't want to look dumb or weak or unqualified, that they'd say, no, no, we'll wait till your brother gets home. Or, they don't want to admit they're tired or distracted or they were up late, or you're, afraid of losing their job. And the other thing is if something goes wrong, they may try to hide it just because they're concerned about all of these factors here. So it's important for parents or supervisors to ask open-ended questions. And can be used to determine if they know how to do the task, but also if they know what the hazards are and how to protect themselves. So open-ended questions are questions that don't require a yes, no answer. Because if I say, Chuck, do you know how to mow the lawn? He's going to say, yeah, absolutely, So instead, I probably want to say, hey, Chuck, tell me, how are you going to do this task? Walk me through it. And then I'm going to assess, just like in that video, if he knows the steps. I might say, what hazards do you need to think about? And what sort of protections do you have in place? Do you have everything you need? Tell me what you need to do this task there. So we can do it with the task related things, but we can also start to get, because these are young workers or youth who are doing this task, we want to assess where they are kind of mentally. How are you feeling today? Tell me what's going, tell me about how you are feeling today. That's sort of a yes, no, but what's new with you? What's going on? And hopefully you're having these conversations on a regular basis. So if somebody's having trouble with, a kid at school or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, that could be very distracting. Maybe they'll have their phone with them and be checking it all the time. So if you know that, you want to say, okay, that sounds like a lot that's going on. But remember, you got to focus when you're doing this task, or even have a policy where you don't have your phone when you're operating the task. And so those are the questions you can ask that are going to help you understand, are they able to do this task today, or should it be reassigned? Because it's better to put off the lawn mowing for a day than to, end up in one of Chuck's pictures or in the hospital there. The other factor here we need to think about is supervision. We talked about training and how often that needs to occur. But we also know that we need to observe people to make sure they're doing things correctly there. And when somebody's doing a task for the first time, they need to have constant supervision until you're comfortable knowing that they can do it. So you need to be within sight and sound and be able to observe them and also to step in case they get into a dangerous situation. As they gain experience, they figure it out, and maybe you've assessed the terrain, it's pretty straightforward, level, no hills, no branches. Then you can, do intermittent supervision where you leave them for a few minutes at a time and then come back and check on them. And then ultimately you'll get to periodic, where maybe it's just at the start of it to make sure they're going, or it's even more infrequently as they get experience. And so there's only one other thing I want to mention here as far as a technique or prevention method, that is modeling safe behaviors. And this may be the most important thing I have to say, because what we know is youth or workers will do what you do and not what you say. I may tell you how to do the task, but if they see me doing it in an unsafe way, not wearing my hearing protection, just charging over a branch or something, they're going to say, that's what I saw Diane do. I'm going to do it too. So it doesn't matter. They don't filter out what's safe and what's not safe. And in that case, we want to make sure we're always doing things the way we're telling our youth to do it there. And that includes assessing the worksite for hazards, doing a walkthrough, being aware. Situational awareness is very important. Wearing the PPE. But it also includes things like taking breaks. Don't try to power through and get everything done at one time. If it's a hot day, if I'm humid, I need to take breaks. And if I want them to take breaks and I don't, they're not going to do it. I also need to show up for work ready to work. So, I can't be dragging my feet. Oh, I'm so tired. I was binging Netflix last night. I got to show that, no, I'm ready to work there. And if there's policies, whether they're on family policies or workplace policies, make sure that everybody knows about them and everybody knows what the consequences are. Maybe if you void the policies, such as having a cell phone, using it while you're on the job, maybe you get a warning, but the next time you're sent home. And ultimately, maybe you can't do that task anymore. And then think of like a mentoring or buddy system, have some more experienced person work with them and make sure that they have that kind of go-to person there. So one more quick video to show you on modeling safe behaviors.
Have you noticed that our supervisors always, and I mean always, wear their seatbelts when they're on the tractor and don't just depend on the rocks to keep them safe?
Yeah. At my old job, no one ever wore seatbelts. One of my friends was in a tractor that rolled, broke her leg.
Wow, that sucks. When I started this job, they told me that rolling the tractor was the #1 cause of death among farmers. That's why we're supposed to wear our seatbelts and use ROPS.
I guess this is why the supervisors are always doing that. It's nice to see they practice what they preach.
So again, not lawn mowing, but it is relevant there. And so the last thing I want to end with is just some of the resources, and I'm going to share my slides. Those can be sent out. But, if this is something you're interested in, you have youth who are working or, engaged in activities, or if you're an employer or even an ag teacher, an educator where you're working with youth, we, with the Children's Center, have developed an online training for supervisors that covers a lot of what I talked about here. And it includes some of those videos that I showed there. And there's a series of 5 videos. They're available both in English and Spanish, covering some of the topics that I presented. And I showed you 2 of those today. And we also have one-pagers, also in English and Spanish. These are all free resources. I'll put a link in the chat, but you're welcome to use them, agsupervisortraining.org. I mentioned the Cultivate Safety Guidelines. Those are another great resource and, also available, but it helps you assess the abilities that are needed to do different tasks. Safety in Agricultural Youth is another great one. And I forgot to mention the Progressive Ag Safety Day. I'm getting the name wrong here. And I apologize for that. That is a great resource. And I hope if somebody's here, please put your link in the chat. And if I've missed others, also put those links in the chat too. So I will end here and you can reach out for questions at any time.
I realize we are out of time. Thank you both so much for your presentation and just really wonderful information that was shared today and how to protect youth and ensure they're getting the best experiences they can out of lawn mowing and being part of, contributing to different things and getting that goodness out of work experiences, but keeping them safe and healthy to enjoy life, a long, full life. So thank you both so much for your time, and thank you everyone who attended. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.